Welcome to Creative in Tech, a podcast show powered by ReadSpeaker AI. I'm your host, Carrie Roberts, and I'm the brand evangelist for North America at ReadSpeaker. And this show is all about highlighting the brands, the organizations, and the people that are creatively using one of the fastest growing spaces in technology, conversational AI. And in the next few episodes, you're going to be hearing from people talking specifically about the banking and financial vertical and how they can or are using conversational AI in a creative way to enhance, innovate, and improve their customer service and strategy. And I am extra excited because I get to share with you one of my colleagues here at ReadSpeaker, Miss Esther Klabbers. She is our speech scientist, and we're all about inclusivity here. And so when we did this show, we wanted to highlight a variety of leaders. And I said, I want to have someone from our team on the show. Esther is one of many amazing researchers that we have on this team. And in fact, she's been doing it for 25 years. Welcome, Esther. I'm excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes. So before we get into all of this, I want to talk about you just a little bit. So as I mentioned, you've been doing this for 25 years, specifically TTS. Can you talk about what got you into it? What excited you then and still excites you about this space now?
Sure. So I grew up in the Netherlands, and when I had to think about what I wanted to become, I didn't really have any idea, but I was really interested in the English language. So I started out studying English language and literature. And then I just happened to come across an area at my university where they were doing computer speech and language. And I found that so fascinating that I ended up studying that. And it was like a super small group of like 6 students in my year. And, back then it was all really new. So we learned about speech recognition and text-to-speech, which was really primitive back then, but it was just really exciting for me. And then I just ended up in Eindhoven in the Netherlands doing my PhD in that topic. And I've been going ever since. And I'm just still really excited about all the different aspects of speech and how we can make computers convert text to speech, so to say.
Yes, so you are definitely an expert. I would say 25 years and continuing to be so passionate about it is a huge asset to not only our company, but the space in general.
Thanks. Yeah, I think so.
Yes. So we are talking, about the banking and financial space. Obviously, you're not directly in that space, but when you think about this vertical, where do you see it kind of going, and where could conversational AI potentially play a role now and into the future?
Well, what I'm thinking is, look, banks have had IVR systems for several years now, probably already decades. But with conversational AI and AI in general, you see more abilities to personalize conversations and to have more freedom in the kind of conversations that you're generating, that you're creating with the customer. And in such a way, I think it makes conversations easier for the customer because they don't have to go through this menu like, okay, say 1 to go talk to someone, or say 2 to go to your account, and so on. So I think it just creates a more natural and effective experience for customers.
Yes, I definitely agree that there is a difference and it can be just a better experience overall. And there was this stat that I was telling you about before we started from a research company. It said that 84% of businesses that focus on enhancing the customer experience report an increase in revenue. Another 92% report increased customer loyalty. So this focus on improving customer service, improving customer experience helps a business in such a large way. I think it's something that all sorts of businesses are thinking about, but maybe not putting as much effort into. So, there's a couple different things that we talk about. We talk about customer service, especially in the financial area. And I'd love for you to give maybe potential, use cases for how conversational AI could be used for some of these. So, of course, one of them is really about promoting financial literacy through customer education. So can you give an idea of like how could a bank or financial institution use conversational AI to promote education for their customers?
Well, there are different ways that you could think about it. So one way, as I mentioned before, is there can be IVR systems where a customer can call the system to get information about their own account or to get more information about new products that the bank offers. But the other thing that we've also worked on at ReadSpeaker is the use of text-to-speech in online training material, like videos or something. And the advantage of that is that if a bank decided to make such a video for their customers, they can always change the content as needed. And then they don't have to get a voice talent back into the studio to record this new material. So it's really a versatile and easy way to create some very simple like training material or informational material for customers.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Again, you can kind of adjust it on your own once it's set up, which makes the education much easier. And then, of course, kind of another one is really about being able to answer questions and also be omnichannel. Can you talk a little bit about how conversational AI helps when it comes to answering questions that potential clients have or customers, as well as being an omnichannel presence?
That's a little bit of a tricky question for me, actually.
Well, I think, like, I guess what I mean is when I think about, conversational AI and we talk about omni-channel, sometimes people think, oh, it should only be a chatbot or it should only be a voice
mm,
skill, but it can be on the website, it can be a mobile
right.
app, it can
No, that's
be
true.
in
Yeah.
person, right? So it can be everywhere. And so when we're talking about the conversational piece, being able to speak to it, it speak back to you. IVR, again, you gave that example. So anything to
hmm
kind of, go off of
Okay,
that.
gotcha.
Hmm.
Yeah, gotcha. So I think one thing that you could really think about is if you want to have a specific voice in your text to speech, like a branded voice, then you could use it on all of these different platforms, like you were saying, and it could be the same voice across all these different media or modalities, so to speak. So yeah, that's how I would define
Yeah.
it, I guess.
And so I want to go that we just talked a little bit broad, but again, your specialty is text to speech. That is what we do here at ReadSpeaker. And for those that aren't super familiar with conversational AI when it comes to voice, there's generally three main pieces. The first piece is the automatic speech recognition, where when you speak to some sort of device, it takes in what you have and it has to kind of understand it. Then it goes into some sort of conversational piece where conversational design happens, trying to
hmm
figure out, okay, what should it say? And then it comes back to you in a lot of times that text to speech, that voice that comes back. So that's really what we're focusing on. So can you define even further what text to speech is and why it's an important piece of a conversational AI component for any business, and especially for this conversation, banking and financial institutions to be thinking about?
Okay. Yeah. So to start at the beginning, what is text to speech? Basically, what happens is when we create a text to speech voice, we collect audio from a professional speaker, a voice talent, and in the current day and age, we use a neural network framework to train acoustic models. And these models, they are trained with both this audio data and linguistic data that tells you for each sentence what are the sounds that are being pronounced by the speaker, which words are emphasized, for instance, or which syllables have syllable stress. So when you have a multi-syllable word, you always know which word is stressed in that word.
Mhm.
And that kind of information is all taken in by a neural network, which does a whole series of complicated computations to predict what the audio should sound like. And once it has this model trained, then you can use that to input a new sentence in terms of these linguistic features, and then it will predict the corresponding acoustic features and then convert those to audio. So it's a very complicated process. I would say the quality of the data is really important. So you want to make sure that you select a really good voice talent who has a friendly sounding voice, who can be, really expressive, but also someone who can take directions on how to pronounce certain words and that sort of thing. And we also take really good care of the linguistic part of it, so that we know how to um, convert numbers to, say, dates um, or currency amounts, money amounts, that sort of thing. And if a particular customer has names that they want pronounced in a certain way and our system doesn't do it correctly, they can always get in touch with us, and we will make sure that we have a customer specific dictionary where the pronunciation of that word is stored so that it always does it correctly for the customer. So that's basically, text to speech in general.
Yes, and I want to emphasize this, because what I think is really exciting about this space, and whenever I talk to you or any of our linguist team of any kind, I just get amped up about it. But what's interesting about it is there's a lot of human stuff going on here. So you're doing research on human language. So we'll just take English. Obviously, there's a lot of languages that we do and others do, but you're really looking at the English language. Where do people breathe? Where do they stop when they talk? Where are there certain words? Where do we emphasize? And then you're figuring out, well, how do we now get that to happen with technology? How do we get that to take what's happening? How do we write the code, do whatever we need to do technically so that it happens? That's a lot of work that I think people don't understand the value of that. Can you talk about, I know it's a big process, but briefly a little bit, maybe something that, we've worked on, that maybe you can kind of talk to, or things you found in your research that allowed you to say, okay, this is what we need the machine to do so that it comes out in the best way possible?
Sure. I mean, there are so many different aspects of it that we wouldn't have enough time to talk about it. But one of the things that I'm currently working on that is also relevant to this field is, okay, a lot of our products in the past were based on reading either websites or educational content or books. And now we're focusing more on conversational settings. So what do we have to do when we create new voices to make the voice match that setting, so that it doesn't just sound like the speaker, the voice is reading these prompts to the user. We really want to try to get the intent behind the message, so that if a customer calls the bank with a complaint, that we can respond back with empathy. And so that is a whole different research area on its own. So I won't really go into it, but some of the things that we're looking at is, okay, what kind of sentences are you seeing in conversational settings versus a read setting, like a website reading? The sentences tend to be shorter. We have more questions. So how do we deal with question intonation, for instance? Intonation talks about like how the melody of the sentence goes. And we just want to try to make sure that the neural network learns the correct things, because it will only learn from what it sees. And so if the beginning data doesn't contain similar material to what you want to synthesize, then you're not really going to get the desired results. So that's some of it.
And there's I know just some of it. There's a lot to be learned. Again, the idea of language is fascinating. So again, I think what's interesting to me about conversational AI is there is a creative piece. There is a human piece. It's very involved because it's trying to replicate, not duplicate exactly, but replicate, an interaction you'd have with another human being to the best of its ability. And there has been research that has shown that 93% of communication, when there's no visual, is based on how something is said. And so I always kind of talk about, if I'm speaking to someone and I use one word and I say hello, if I say hello versus hello or hello, it's the same word. And if you didn't see my body, but you just heard that, there would be a different feeling that you have, a different experience based on that. And being able to have a text-to-speech voice that can resemble something like that is huge. Can you talk a little bit about, how that enhances the experience for a human being when they're having a much more customized, a much more natural sounding voice from a TTS?
Sure. I mean, yeah, everybody has experience talking to these kind of IVR systems or chatbots or whatever. But I think if you have a more natural response coming back from the system, then you're more inclined to go along with it and believe, yeah, that you're being cared for by the bank, I would say. And yeah, so one of the things that we're working on right now at ReadSpeaker is I'm involved in a European research project called COBRA, Conversational Brains. And I'm supervising a PhD student who is working at ReadSpeaker. But there's also other researchers, other PhD students in this same EU program. And so one of the research topics that this PhD student, Daisy, is looking at is like things like you were saying, like the word hello, but instead you could think about the word okay, because everybody uses okay in conversations, or the word sorry. You could say sorry or I'm sorry,
Yes.
And how can we classify different renditions of the same word, and how can we synthesize them, and yeah, how can we somehow codify different emotions or intent in these messages and be able to generate them with variability, but not just variability in and of itself, but yeah, with the correct intent behind it, so that the user isn't thrown off.
Yes, because as we're talking about, again, this applies to everything, but today's banking and financial space, I was talking on another episode about, I paid off credit card debt, and I was like, I wanted either the human being or the AI to be like, that's great. Like, I wanted something that was exciting, and it was lackluster and nothing. And I was like, this is a big deal. Like, I want someone to say, this back. And I think, versus somebody who can't pay off the debt and they were just charged something by accident. Now they're frustrated. And so, like you said, there has to be a difference in noticing the person and what they're saying, but then also coming back with the right, I don't want to say, emotion, but just like you said, right inflection or whatever the word is to make the difference, right?
Exactly. And I think another thing that we're really starting to look into now is the effect of context. So typically with text to speech, you synthesize one sentence at a time and they're totally unrelated. But if you have a conversational AI system, you could have information that comes from the ASR and from the dialogue and from the conversation design element that gives information to the text to speech that says, oh, in this conversation, you've already talked about this concept, so there's no need to emphasize this particular word again because it's known information. Yeah, those kind of things I think are also really relevant and make it easier for users to understand and process the messages, because yeah, you have like this shared space of concepts that you've been talking about.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Not just text to speech, but the other thing that has really developed in the last few years, and it's something we also specialize in, is this custom voice. Some people call it a branded voice, a vocal identity, synthetic, which is a lot of different things. But this idea that when we're talking about conversational AI, and we're talking about more at a voice standpoint, that it's no longer enough to just have a conversational AI. There needs to be a customized voice. There needs to be a sonic brand. We just had Ray Wong talking about, where everything is going, when you have people like Google and Amazon and Facebook dominating, you want to stand out. You don't want to sound like everything else. I mean, we're talking about skills. How many times have I gone into Amazon or Google skill, and they all sound the same because it's the same voice of the Amazon or Google assistant, which means now I've connected the brand to Amazon or Google, not to the brand that created the skill. And it's not just skill. It could be a mobile app, again, in the car, whatever it is that you're using. And so we're seeing this need for brand and experience to really be top of mind more than anything else to be able to survive and thrive in this world. Can you talk about, some of the work that we done to whatever extent we can about how, these custom voices have kind of helped these organizations, and why they kind of wanted to add it, and maybe just in general, how this could help the brand as a whole?
Sure. I know there's an example in the Netherlands of the bol.com voice that we did recently, which is a online website just like Amazon, but just local for the Netherlands. And yeah, I think people react really positively to that, and they really start, if you have that same voice on the website, but also as a Google action, I believe you can also call it and say, hey, I want to talk to bol.com, and then you get that voice. Yeah, I think they're really happy with it. And yeah, from my perspective, I'm the one that's dealing somewhat with like the voice talents that we select to be these kind of branded voices, and we always do that together with the customer. And yeah, that's always interesting because sometimes they have preferences for one voice or another, and it may not necessarily work well as a text-to-speech voice. So there always has to be some back and forth on finding the best people. And what I also think is really important is, especially here in the US, is that we can showcase a variety of voices with different ethnic backgrounds and young and old. And we've even talked about creating a voice that's like, how do you say? I would say like non-binary or
Gender neutral.
Not gender neutral voice. Yeah, exactly. I couldn't get the word there.
Yeah. Well, and it's, I agree. I mean, again, for us, we're so much about this inclusion piece. I mean, that's a lot of where this company started, with accessibility and inclusion. And so, like you said, when you're talking about voices, a lot of times with assistants, it tends to be kind of young female voices. But there's so many voices out there, and finding the right one for you. And like you said, when it comes to it, it's not just about, okay, it's showcasing your brand and creating a better customer experience. But when you are selecting that voice actor, which is where it starts, as you mentioned, the big thing is they do have to be a professional. They do have to be trained. They do have to be able to speak clearly, be able to take direction, because it starts with that. Can you talk a little bit about that at all, about, what it means to take direction when somebody is choosing a voice talent?
Yeah, absolutely. So typically when we record a voice, we do it remotely. So the voice talent is in their own little studio, and we are remotely on the other end of a connection, just like we are having now. And then they can see the sentences on the screen, and they read the sentences, and we record them. And one of our linguists is always there to talk to the voice talent and say, oh, could you read this again? Or could you do that? One of the important things is that they can read a whole sentence without stuttering or having to reset mid-sentence. Our text-to-speech, our neural networks cannot deal well with that kind of material, so it has to be clean. And also every little pop or click that someone makes is also part of the training material for the neural net. So whatever you put in could also come out. So you just want to have really clean data, like you said, clear pronunciation. Someone who's really sloppy in pronouncing words, then you will end up with a lot of material that you can't really use for training. So yeah, it's really tricky.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I think, when I always talk about conversational AI, or I talk about voice, and I'm educating. There's so many pieces to it. I think sometimes organizations might feel overwhelmed, but there's so many different people that work together. We partner with people who do the other pieces we don't do. And so we always kind of know who to work with and how to do it and guide people so they don't have to feel lost. But there are a lot of moving pieces, and you do want to make sure that you're thinking about this as a whole robust thing. It doesn't mean you necessarily have to do everything and make it perfect. That's not what it is. We want to start with something, but it's important to think about, okay, I don't want to just, do conversational AI just to do it. We want to do it right. And that includes not just the conversational design piece, but the customization of it to make it your own. Do you have, any maybe like one tip or piece of advice that you would give to, again, because we're talking about banking and finance today, for that industry when it comes to conversational AI, something maybe they should be thinking about as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, especially with respect to text-to-speech, I would say, don't just go for the cheapest solution, but go for the solution where you feel like the TTS company will give you a lot of their time to help you customize and to make sure that you get the best branded voice for your business. That's basically my main tip. And I know at ReadSpeaker, we spend a lot of time with our customers. We have a whole linguistic team that answers questions from customers, and can change things, sometimes even on the fly. And I know a lot of other companies can't do that. They may have a yearly update or something. And just the customer care and the high quality that we try to strive for is really important, I think.
Yeah, it's always making sure that you're finding the right people to do the work. And like I said, I'm very proud to be a part of this team, to have people like yourself, 25 years. I mean, that says a lot about, again, the passion, the knowledge, the education. And again, we specialize in TTS. Others specialize in ASR and conversational design. And it's really important for any institution to be thinking about, okay, I need to do all these pieces, and what does that look like, and how do I plan that out and be able to kind of interact with each piece. So I thank you so much. If people want to learn more or they want to connect with you, where's the best place to do that?
Well, to read more about our TTS research, I would say go to the ReadSpeaker.ai website. And you can also find me on LinkedIn, Esther Klabbers. Just type it in and you'll find it. And you can send me an email or connect on Twitter or whatever. Doesn't matter.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Esther. It's so wonderful to be able to share one of my colleagues and the great work you're doing. I think it's important to recognize not only external, but the internal team that we have here. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. And if you're watching and listening, don't forget to subscribe to our ReadSpeaker AI YouTube channel that has all of our live videos on there. And then also on the podcast, Creative and Tech, wherever you listen to your audio podcast.